Okay, we're good. Well, let's get started. I'm going to start the recording.
Okay,
Okay, we don't have the feedback, but which is good. We're in the same room. So, Louise, why don't you set up your broadcast and I'll introduce our special guest.
well, okay. Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to Mental Health in Your Neighborhood. It is important, as I've always said, every single week, every year that I have done the broadcast, I have said that it is important to me, to you, to my guest, to my hosts, whoever is with me, to know and understand how important it is for us to talk about our mental health, because that is important. So this morning, my co-host is my usual co-host, and that is Pastor Bruce Wall. And I'm pleased to have him, and he's invited someone that I know that has never been on the broadcast before that will be on this morning. Good morning, Pastor Bruce.
Good morning, Sister Louise, and it is great to be on the air with you again on another Wednesday. And you and I had a grand time on last Wednesday with our broadcast. I don't remember what we talked about, but I know it was a grand, wonderful time. And I decided that we needed to invite Larry to come in. He wanted to come into the studio, and I asked if he would be our guest on the broadcast, and what he normally does is that he consented, and he basically said he misses being in the studio with me, not with you, but with me. And so here he is. Larry Nobles is our special guest today on mental health in your neighborhood. So why don't we ask Larry just to greet the people and talk with us about why he's here. See if that matches up to what I said. Are you going to wreck my chair? Because the handles.
There goes the chair. I'm not sure if I could be a part of these conditions.
But all seriousness, I'm here because I really just want to spend some time with the pastor and reconnect.
I cannot hear you.
I really want to spend some time with the pastor. Reconnect. Can you hear me?
That's better.
Okay. So he said, well, come on down to the studio. And it happened to be during your broadcast, and here I am.
That's
what I
all.
was all thinking.
Larry, since it's my broadcast, I want to welcome you, Larry, because I do know you. I've known you many years. I don't know exactly how long it has been that we have known each other, but it has been a while. Mm-hmm. And I enjoy your company. I enjoy the conversation I've had with you in the past. And I'm happy to welcome you to the broadcast of mental health, because it's very important to me that we talk about our mental health, what we do, what's important to us, how we do it. Mm-hmm. And we can give information to those people who are listening to us who might want to learn something about their own mental health. So that could happen while we're exchanging conversation, Larry, you and I, and Pastor Bruce.
Okay.
Good.
Well, I really cannot recall what we talked about last week, but it was a substantive conversation. I was talking about, I know I talked a little bit about retirement. I talked about my age, and the fact that Louise and I are both seniors. I'm just a few years behind her. We usually talk from a perspective of being seniors. Now that we have, well, I can't call Larry a young man because he's also up there, Louise. I mean, he's right. I'm right behind you. He's right behind me. So But we at least have a good bench today to be able to talk about a number of things.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Because the point I made was that everything that we talk about on my broadcast has to do with what's happening in our lives and what we're planning and what we're doing. And last broadcast, you and I talked about medical issues that changed the way we operate our business and our lives. That's what we talked about last week.
Okay, so the older person remembers specifically what we talked about. The younger person, being me, doesn't have a clue, but that's okay. That's just the way it is. I'm going to ask Larry, because if it wasn't for Larry, we wouldn't have all of the internet cables going from the studio all the way upstairs into the balcony, all the way into Louise's office, so that they have the internet in her office and they can use the different machines that are there. So Larry was a part of that. And but I have no idea how long Larry, or when Larry started with the broadcast here at the church. You have any sense of what year you actually started the broadcast, or running around with the camera and filming?
2023 right now. I would have to say
He's thinking, Louise.
I know. I see him
It's been such a
thinking.
long
It's this younger generation. They just can't keep things into their
maybe
thinking.
10 years, because seeing the young man in the broadcast studio.
Mhm.
I remember he also came over to the Boston broadcast studio as well.
Yes. So I would say about
10,
10,
12
12
years.
years.
Okay, because in 2010, we actually started our broadcast, Boston Press Radio and TV 2010. So it had to go even further back than 2010.
Yes.
And Larry would film the church services, and then he had to, I believe, take it home and edit it.
In my
In my
basement.
basement.
Yeah, which was a lot of time. And then he would have to bring it to BNN so that they can put it on the air. Was that the BNN downtown, or the BNN on Washington Street on the Dorchester Jamaica Plain line?
The one on Washington Street.
On Washington Street. Okay.
Washington, yes,
Right.
yes.
And it was a whole lot different then editing than editing now, because he had a tape. It was a
It was a mini video tape.
mini cassette tape.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how they did that, because the way that I edit the broadcast, it's digital, and it's so much easier just to do it on the computer the way that we did it. But that's what he did, and that's one of the things that he did. And he was also in charge of our men's fellowship. And so he and I have been going out to lunch and spending some time getting to know each other, renewing the friendship, and it's been a good experience. Whenever we went out to eat, he's a high roller, so he wanted to pay for all the meals, he wanted to pay for all the tolls, he wanted to pay for all the parking, and I had to say, no, we'll come at it as equal partners. And although he wanted to spend a whole lot of money on his old pastor, we agreed that we would what we agreed that we would share. Louise and I used to go to lunch after the BNN broadcast. Remember that, Louise?
Yes, I do.
And we would go down to the Olive Garden.
I remember when we crossed the street together, and some people driving by would stop their automobile and ask us what the two of us were doing together on the street.
And it's something's really funny. Whenever Louise and I are hanging out together, she makes it her business, especially to people she doesn't even know. He's my pastor. Yeah, that's my pastor. Because people are always asking her, what church do you go to? And she'll say Global Ministries. And they'll say to her, Global Ministries, who's the pastor there? And she'll say, Pastor Bruce Wall. And they said, you know, he's black. She said, she does this. She says, he is. That's happened. And now the newest thing, Larry, with the churches, and I know with this church, at 12th Baptist Church, we had multiple vans that the young people would use and that the seniors would use to pick them up at their homes and bring them back. Now, a number of the churches are using the ride. So we have 3 people in the church now that use the ride. What is the biggest complaint with the ride, Louise?
For me, the biggest complaint is how early in the morning they want me to be ready to be picked up on Sunday morning.
In Hull.
In Hull, yes, because I live furthest away.
Right. Well, I used to work for the ride.
Oh, you did?
Ah,
And those trips out to Hull,
I never had the privilege of picking you up, of course.
Sister Louise.
But you would want the people to be ready. Most of the time, they wouldn't be ready. So I don't know how the regulations changed since I left, but that was one of our biggest complaints as a driver, especially in a van, was the fact that because you needed so much time to, accommodate the passenger.
now, well, let me tell you something, Larry. Last Sunday, I was told to be ready to be picked up for church on Sunday at 5:39 a.m.
That's ridiculous.
And I was downstairs in my lobby at 5:30 a.m. to be sure to be picked up, and I was.
Why so
And that
early?
was not reasonable time for me. But I did it because they told me if I didn't go downstairs and get the car at that time, that they would cancel it for the day.
Wow. That's
And what about the ride home? Tell us about the ride.
The ride home, I was supposed to get at 12:15. Instead, it came at 1:30 and I arrived home at 3:30.
But the amount that the seniors are paying though for the ride, you can't beat that, because if she was coming on the Lyft or Uber, that could be a $30 or $40 trip just one way.
yeah.
I don't pay that. I don't pay that.
Right. So there are times when the ride will actually send a Lyft or an Uber, and she still pays that nominal fee as though she was going in the van. So, so I know the times that they've been too early to pick up or late in picking up or late in picking up from the church. But when I look at how much seniors are paying for the ride, it's worth it to be able to minimize it. Otherwise, 3 of our seniors wouldn't be able to come to church.
So when
That's
they,
right.
When they pick you up on Sunday, Sister Louise,
are there other people in the car?
I didn't hear you.
Are there other people in the car when they pick you up on Sundays?
Sometimes I'm the first one. They pick me up first and then they pick up someone else in Braintree, and then someone else in Weymouth and someone else in Mattapan before they get me to Dorchester.
That could explain their early time, because they know
Yes.
that they're making multiple pickups.
Oh, I understand that, but it doesn't take that long to get from Hull to Quincy to Weymouth.
No, it's a half hour. It's a half hour.
Yeah. What time does church begin?
Yeah.
10 o'clock.
That's a long time.
Now that would be, I know. So that's a problem. The time is the problem, but the cost is inexpensive. And I am getting a ride into my church that I have been attending, Larry, for 30 years.
Amen.
Isn't that something?
Amen.
30 years. And when she's one of the first ones to arrive. Who's the first, Larry, tell me who is the first person who arrives for church on Sunday mornings here? Who do you think it is?
Sister Louise?
No.
You Pastor Bruce.
No.
Really?
Edna.
Edna, Sister Edna.
She comes from Randolph. She's the first to arrive. It's the seniors that are usually the people that are coming early.
Oh.
Edna's first. She's sweeping, she's cleaning the glass. She has
Yeah.
a little table in the back. That's her. We call it the Edna table. She passes out bulletins, has people sign in. She used to take the temperature, but she is really in charge of all of that. And as a senior, I so appreciate her and her commitment to our church and fellowship.
And to individuals. She calls me to make sure that I have a ride. And then she wants to know what time I have arrived home, that I am home safely.
Larry, how did you go? I didn't know you actually were a part of the ride. So how did you go? Well, that was the first thing you did for the MBTA, the ride, and then to where you are now?
Yes. So I worked for the ride for, well, first, when I was there, started
Started
off
off
just
just
a
a
driver,
driver, and I was supervisor, trainer,
and
and
then
then
the
the
opportunity
opportunity
for
for
the
the
T
T
came.
came.
So it just seemed like a logical step. I'm glad I made it.
Amazing. Wow. Wow.
I met a lot of people along the way, from the customers to the other drivers. So when I see them on the bus, well, somebody said about a month ago, you used to give me a ride on the ride to church. And I'm like, I remember you, and it was a good time. It was a good reunion, if you will.
So how did you manage the pickups and the drop-offs? Were you that early? Did the dispatcher give you the information so you arrived late and people were mad? Did you go through what she's going through as a driver?
There were times, but not to that extreme. You have your scheduled time, or let's say your run. So I worked on Sundays, so say I start at 6 o'clock. I come in at 6 o'clock, you punch in onto, I believe it was the monitor, let's call it the monitor. And it'll tell you what you have to, who you have to pick up. They'll give you the date, the time, and they'll give you directions. And that's how you get it. You don't get to pick and choose. And
You go where they send you.
for the most part, yes. Sometimes, depending on the work you pick, some people like to drive around and haul in Weymouth and Quincy. I preferred it as opposed to picking up in the city.
Well, could you explain this so that Louise understands it? Last Sunday, last Sunday, they would say, "Oh, we're 10 minutes away," because she would call in, where's the ride? We're 10 minutes away. Then it's 20 minutes, then it's 25 minutes. Then they say, the next ride, it's only 3 minutes away. And it's a different ride. It's a different color automobile, right? So when you left on Sunday, Louise, did you go on a what do they call them? Did you go on the ride, or were you on an Uber or a Lyft?
I was on the lift.
She was on a Lyft. So they kept changing what was going to pick her up.
So
What causes that?
sometimes somebody could be stuck in traffic, could be an accident. The ride, the vans, especially the van, I drove the van, they would break down. And if one person has an accident, and let's say that person is servicing or leaving the city to go to Hull or Quincy, but you have your hands full because you have your own work to do, then somebody at Central will have to make a decision. Okay, do I take Pastor off of his route, give him Larry's route, or do we just get an Uber or Lyft? And that's what they usually do. So when they keep changing it, they're trying to figure it out what to do.
Well, that happened last Sunday because there were,
Yeah.
right, Louise, there were 3 separate rides that were
Yes, there were
supposed to come to you.
three other people that were picked up and taken to another location.
Yeah.
Yes.
But again, the cost for the ride, for me, I'm not taking it yet, but the cost for the ride is really, it's worth it. It's worth using the ride for the minimal amount of money that you're spending. versus not being able to get out of your house to go to your dental appointments or your doctor's appointments. It's really important that we have the service. And I'm glad we have it at the church because it enables people to come back. And when Louise comes in, no matter what time she comes in, she's usually early. She's always escorted all the way down to the front of the sanctuary. She takes the whole pew. She has a walker now. She puts the walker in the pew and she's in charge, and she's now the oldest member of the church. Can you believe that she's the oldest member?
Yes.
You're the mother of the church. That's what we call you, the mother.
I'm
And
the oldest
is right
member.
behind her.
Yes, and people come up to me and they say, I heard you were the oldest member of the church. How old are you? And when I tell them, they say, no, you're not, because I don't look that age.
You're very regal looking.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
So you
look the same. You look the same to me.
Yeah.
You really do.
Wow.
You know, I'm trying to figure out Larry and Saladin, if I'm correct, and Santos, Larry Saladin, Santos, and Michael Allwood all had a broadcast.
Allwood, yes.
And they had a broadcast at WEZE radio. And how long did you guys do that?
Maybe about a year.
About a year.
Maybe.
It was like four men trying to figure out how to gel together with a lot of different personalities and gel together so that they can arrive at the studio and try to figure out how they can be one in communicating whatever it is that they were going to talk about on their broadcast. But their broadcast, Louise, it wasn't as popular as the one that we're doing, but it became a very popular broadcast. Why, Larry?
It did.
Because people were listening to us. It was just four brothers. We would laugh, we would cry. I mean, it just flowed. It was so natural. And as they say now, organic. You know, I don't have to struggle with it like you might have to, Pastor, sometimes.
You see that, Louise? He started.
The broadcast was Mighty Men of Messiah.
Mighty Men of Messiah.
And Louise, a lot of women would tune in and listen to them, and we found out they wanted to hear them because their husbands or boyfriends were not talking to them and saying the things that these guys were saying. That we kept hearing that they wanted to hear the men of Messiah. I found that to be fascinating.
We had people calling in from Atlanta, New York, just all over. It's amazing. But the
one time we experienced a little bit of fame, if you will. We went over to that church on Cedar Street to get some dinner.
Yeah,
that big white church, and we were in line, and we said they recognized our voices. They said, "Are you the Mighty Men of Messiah?" I'm like,
wow.
"Yes, we are."
Wow.
They happened about 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
Praise the Lord.
Good.
That happens.
We didn't get any free food, mind you. I had a chicken wing dinner.
Yeah, you should have got free food.
We didn't get any free food.
That happens to the Mamleo broadcast. Larry has said, and Dr. Bradley has said that there have been places and people have recognized them because it's now not just the voices, it's what they see. And they're always being complimented by people. You never know who is listening, and you never know who is watching the broadcast. So you have to do this as though hundreds and thousands of people were listening and watching you, even if it was only one person and they stay with the broadcast and they're really being blessed by it. It is worth doing this. Now, I don't know if you remember Dr. Stephen Davis from Calvary Gospel Church in Newark, New Jersey. Do you remember him at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
I
so
remember his voice.
well, he and I do a broadcast here every Tuesday from 9 to 10, and we incorporated another guy. So he's in New Jersey broadcasting to Boston. I'm in Boston, and the third person is Randy Neighbors. He's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So we do it every single week. Stephen has been in the hospital for the past 30 days. And he was just released. He's now going to be in rehab for an extended period of time. So we've missed him. But even that broadcast also attracts, we're called the three young men. All three of us are seniors, but we call ourselves the three young men. Even Karen will ask me when I'm leaving the house in the morning on a Tuesday, are the three young men going to be on today? And I want to tell her no, because when she's listening, if she doesn't like the comments that I'm making, or if they're incorrect, she calls in and corrects me live on the air. Well, tell us, Louise, I want you to hear this story. So Larry told me that there was a period of time that he was attending a church that started early in the morning and it went all day, because 2 Sundays ago, we had a West Indian brother who was at church, a young guy. And he said, when service was over, he says, it's over. I said, yeah, it's over. He said, over in Jamaica, would still be going. It wouldn't be over now. They probably, some churches will go ahead and eat and then come back for the second service. So could you talk about the service that you were a part of, the church that you were a part of, and how they blessed the congregation by it? It doesn't seem like many people were fighting it either, that they were embracing it. What's wrong with staying in church all day on a Sunday? Seriously, I mean, youth group.
Seriously? Well, being a
Being a
youth
youth group is different because you have church, then after church.
you spend time with the youth, so that's, you don't look at it as, well, it's a long day because it's broken up.
Yeah.
Being raised in the Baptist church, time to stop. Bible, Sunday school, beginning of service, announcements, all of, even up to GMCC. That's what I've learned. So when I started going to a Pentecostal church, it was nothing like that. And I had to really fight through that.
What time did it start?
Supposedly, well, it was scheduled to start at 10 o'clock or 10:30.
Okay.
That was a praise and worship.
Okay.
And prayer. And I'm not gonna say the name of the church.
No, we don't want
But
that.
we would have to wait for our pastor. I'm gonna say that. We'd have to wait for the pastor. It would just go on and on, and there was no AC. And so by the time we got to the word, they believed in letting the Spirit do what it wants to do. And there was no rushing. I mean, we beat that. And we'll go on. So church is supposed to be done by 1:30, 2 o'clock. Sometimes we can get out there till 6, 5:30.
Louise, so
Somebody, an old Baptist. And I'm a diabetic, so I have to
Oh,
pop
wow.
out and get something to drink.
You're eligible to be with us regularly.
so Louise, so going to what he's saying, you're here at 8:30. I mean earlier sometimes, but you're here for the Sunday school class, then the service, and we have to stop because there's another church that comes in at 1, and they take it and they go to 3.
Mhm.
But Louise, can you see us going all day to 6 o'clock? Would that be something that your stamina would allow you to manage?
If I could stop and have a snack or something cold to drink, that would be fine. I could do it.
That's a norm. That is a norm for a number of churches, especially if they have a second service, their own service, an evening service. So it will be the food that, and they want to hold people over so that they'll come to the second service. And my attitude is, what's wrong with giving up a day, 1 day out of the week for a time of service and fellowship? Obviously, if nothing's coming out of the services, it's just a boring time, that's a different story. But when it's powerful, it's really, really touching your life, I wouldn't mind doing that, although I might these days fall asleep in the afternoon. Need to take my nap, Louise.
Well, Pastor, some of the preaching that you have done from the altar has been well worth something that could be on the broadcast.
You see how she compliments me?
And all you do is talk about her age.
Well, again, it's good to have Larry here. Larry, I think I'm correct. Weren't you here when they were building this studio?
Yes.
Okay, so talk to us about what that experience was like when you saw it being built. Again, you were here from the beginning, so when this thing was being built, what was happening? What did you say? What did you see? Could you conceptualize what it was going to look like when it was done?
No,
I had no idea. And
to be perfectly honest, it wasn't people that were building it. I believe it was our brother Eric Leiter who did all of, if not all of the work, most of the work, 95% of it.
He did all the work.
So he did all the work. So it was, I believe it was, his vision was inspired by God, which came through you, Pastor, because you always talked about people should have a ministry and a mission, and you got to be, your ministry has to be part of that mission. And I thought that's what he was going with, and obviously that's what it is, because that's what we have here today. It's always amazing to me. I'm proud when I talk about the broadcasts and the station and my pastor, because we've come a long way, and you stayed on course. I know it's been bumpy, up and down, but you stayed on course. And we talked about earlier when I went over to see the broadcast academy, and to be able to come back, you know, being gone for so many years, it's good to come home. And I thank God that He planted you near the water, and you've been steadfast, and I appreciate that.
I love you for that.
I really do. But I did have, can I have a
Louise,
question?
he's trying to make us cry.
No,
I stopped because I don't want to.
But
I do have a question for
Louise. What is your broadcast? Is it okay? Because I've worked for the team, Sister Louise, and we tend to deal with a lot of folk from mass and cast, the homelessness, the addictions. I mean, you see it all over. I don't care what route I drive, I see it, and I see how it affects me as a driver, the other passengers, and the community, and how it affects the police. We call them transit, the Boston Police, EMS, and how people respond to these things on a daily basis. And have you noticed, or you had any feedback on how this epidemic has spread throughout the city? I'm talking about even up to Newton and Wellesley. And how, do you see an end to this, or what the city can do about it? That was a question.
That's a question to you,
Yeah.
Louise.
Oh, I didn't realize you were asking me the question,
Yes.
because it was making me very quiet. I was getting very sad, and it was making me quiet. I'm sorry. So what was the question again, Larry, please?
The question is, because it has an impact, not just on mass and cast, but throughout the city, and even out to areas that we service, like Newton and Wellesley, Brighton. It's everywhere, how the effects of that one area has spread throughout, and the mentality, even how EMS may respond, or the police may respond, the fire department may respond. How do you recommend anything to the city and the outlook?
Yeah, I agree that it's very important for people who live in that community to be having meetings and talking about what kinds of things need to be done within their community. And they need to stay with it and stay together and make a plan and function the plan and do the right thing to make sure that children do not get hurt and people who are have a mental illness and live in a special location do not get laughed at or pointed at or made fun of. Those kinds of things have happened too. So those things should not be the kinds of things that some adults do that are not appropriate, like shooting someone is not appropriate. And in our church a couple of weeks ago, Pastor Bruce had a major meeting with a number of churches, including our own, where we talked about what we were going to do to help people to understand how to take care of what was going on in their building, their church building.
So it was an active shooters seminar that we had. What would we
Right.
do if somebody came in?
You know, when we were trained on the bus, there was no talk about how to communicate with people, whether they're people in need or just people who are not in need. I'll say it that way. It does affect you. And you see this every day. You could be driving to work and somebody will tap on the window. Can I have, can I have some money or something? And you say no, or you ignore them. And then they get violent.
Right.
It affects everybody. But as an individual, I find the TV, and nobody can tell me how to handle it. So I go to God when I get on the bus. And I have to go with that covering, knowing that no matter what comes my way, I'm equipped to handle it because I'm covered. Now, when we the city or state, whatever they're trying to do, I can say it's not enough, and it's not fast enough. So my attitude is I try to respect everybody, no matter what they look like, and no matter what they smell like, and where they're coming from or where they're going. So that allows me to get through the day without being aggravated and angry and disgusted. I consider myself a normal person. So when I begin to respond to people getting on the bus or wanting to get on the bus, and they say, don't let certain people on the bus if they can't stand up, that's obvious. But sometimes people look normal and they got some things going on. And I notice how other people on the bus will respond. And so as a Christian man, I'm just, Lord, protect not just me, but everybody on this bus. Even the one that gets on, it may not have all their faculties, but it's such a cloud over the city. And you can feel it. It's in the atmosphere. You pull up to a station, I'm not going to tell, any station, and you see it and you feel it. And the mentality is, so some people is like, get away from me. I don't care about you. But I feel like we're stopping the caring part in our society. And I've been guilty of it. I'm not in the mood today. But thank God he didn't treat us like that. And thank God for a son who died. I never thought that would happen. I would be challenged every day to have that grace and mercy that had took me have to have for others. Some days it's not easy at all, but
I know that there are many things that are not easy in our lives, many things. And there's no need to be embarrassed at all.
Louise, being a bus driver in the city and being a bus driver in the part of the city where there's the greatest need, because if you're on a route, you know that route, you know you're going to be passing through a part of the city where
Right.
there's a need. And it's, what do you do when your own attitude is not in check and your own attitude isn't right? Maybe you've experienced too much of this in one day and you're driving a bus. How do you adjust yourself emotionally to say, I've got to care, even though I'm tired, even though I've already done 3 runs through this and now it's the same people, it's different people. Louise, how do we adjust our hearts and our minds to say, I'm a bus driver, but I'm also a Christian. I'm also a believer. How do you intersect your faith with your work?
Well, we have to make a decision about changing our attitudes first. That's the first thing we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're just going to be angry and we're going to be resent the people who ask for money or do something that we think is not appropriate, then we're not going to make a correction. And that's not good either. So once we decide that we want to make a correction in the community, then we can probably get some mental health training, or we can meet with somebody who's providing some discussion and training for people to do the right thing. Because I know that when I used to drive, which I no longer drive, I have sold my car back to the dealership. But when I used to drive and people would ask for money, I would hand them money and ask them if they wanted prayer. And there were a number of people that said, "Oh my God, lady, you want to pray for me?" Mm-hmm. And they were shocked. And I did make a very short prayer on the corner for someone I had given money to. And I kept going, and then I might have seen them again, and they waved to me and they remembered me. So it developed into a better attitude than it had been if I ignored them or if I was nasty, that the way some people are. That's not correct to me.
So Larry, why is it, so you're talking about some of the homeless and people that are hurting and you see them during your workday. Why does that cause you to show the emotion that you just showed?
Because I know there's a battle going on. And the enemy, he's got his foot on the neck of our community. And he's not letting up. So I can't change anybody, but let God change me in my heart. Now, I'm not saying everything is hard, because there are victories in my day. And I try to treat people who are in need with more respect than they're treating themselves. And that usually translates to them saying to me, "Thank you. I appreciate it." And that I take those little victories. And I remember one time being taught by Deacon Richard Scott, And he was telling about, it was after prayer meeting, and somebody gave it testimony. And he said to that person, and I was there, he said, take those little victories and put them in a jar, close that jar up. And then when you need a victory, unscrew that jar and take that victory out. And that's what I've been doing. I take the little victory because they outweigh most of the battles. You know, it's every day it's individual battles. And I'm not grateful to God that I can win most of them through Him and that Holy Spirit that stays with me. But it's tough. It's tough. You can see it on the community. It's like a 90-degree, 70% humidity. That oppression, that oppressive heat. You can see it. You can look at people. You can feel it. And sometimes I just have to start singing and just get it off. Just get it off.
Mhm. Well, Larry, I appreciate the fact that you said that you could change yourself, but you could not change other people. Because that's the reality. That is your reality, and that is our reality, and that works for us. So if we want to change ourselves, we can do something positive. But we can't complain about other people and change them if they don't want help, if they don't want to be changed. But you said the right thing. I appreciated that. Thank you.
So just one last question on this thing about Mass and Cass. So you're saying that some of your bus routes go through there?
Some of them.
And again, you can't say, I don't want to take that bus route when that's given to you or handed out to you. You got to take it and go.
Well, you got to. What I'm saying is, you have to pick your work. And some of those routes are when your work. And so you really don't have any other choice. There's really no way to get away with it. But it may be at Mass and Cass, that's what, let's say it originates there, but it spreads out throughout the whole entire city. I don't care what station you go to, you're gonna see some people in need. It happens on the train, the buses, commuter rail. It's everywhere. So it's not just a Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan issue. It's a citywide, statewide issue. And I can only do what I can do during the day on that bus, or even when I'm waiting for a bus. And that's what gets me through. But you know, I think sometimes when you say to a community that's already heard, we're gonna make that bus free. We'll make it free. It doesn't make that route faster at all. It just makes that route more popular. So now you have all these people who wouldn't ride the bus because they may not have their fare, get on the bus. And sometimes they're not in their right mind, they're inebriated, they're high, got a bad attitude, and it doesn't take much to start a fire. So if the mayor was able to speak to the drivers on the buses and on the trains, she would have a better idea in the truck. She would have a better idea what the impact is. You riding the bus with all your constituents and the police, of course you have a great ride. Ride the bus. When it starts getting dark, kids are in school, or even when the kids are out of school, it's a different scene. I'm not saying the T is bad and the people that ride it are bad, It only takes one person. And unfortunately, there's multiple people at any given time.
So that's a lot, Louise, to unpack.
It sure is, it sure is. And it reminded me of something that happened to me many years ago. I can't even remember the number of years, but I took a bus through Roxbury one time, and I was sitting on the front seat behind the driver, and a woman, very well dressed, got on the bus in Roxbury, and she came over to me and she put her hands in my purse and took my wallet out and went to the back of the bus and then asked the driver to let her off the back of the bus, which he did. And she left with my wallet, and I didn't know that she had taken it. And when it was time for me to pay somebody, I looked and I said, I had no wallet. I didn't know where it was. And so the bus driver allowed me to leave because he believed what I had to say. But I couldn't believe that someone who looked so nice to me, she was a Black woman, she was dressed perfectly, she had a purse, she had a corsage on her jacket, she had a lovely hat. She just looked very attractive to me. And yet she put her hands in my purse and took my wallet and stole it. And I didn't notice that. I didn't notice it. It was amazing. So sometimes people have a bad attitude and you notice the attitude before you notice what they want to do. But this one was something that I had no idea was going to happen to me. And it did happen.
Yeah.
That I'm sure that happens all the time on the train or on the bus.
I was just shocked. And of course, I don't take the public transportation now because I take the ride. But I have accommodation from the driver. The driver does fine with me.
Louise has this, we have 4 minutes left. Louise has this preference when she's in an Uber. I don't know if it is also she feels this way about the ride, but when she's in an Uber, MBTA, that she always wants to sit in the front. And some of them aren't used to that. So she'll go to the front, says, I want to sit in the front. And that happened this Sunday when you wanted to sit in the front and I opened the front door. I was going to force her in before the guy said no. And we looked at the front seat and the front seat looked like he was living in the front seat. So I said to Louise, you got to get in the back.
Yeah.
How was that ride, Louise, by the way?
The ride was fine, but I couldn't see anything because that's why I don't like sitting in the back, because the seat in the front and the headrest and everything, that's all right in your vision.
She's very adamant. You know, I didn't know why she felt she needed to sit in the front because they're not used to having somebody in the front. There's nothing that prohibits a person from sitting in the front, is there, other than what they have on the front seat?
Well, the ride, no. But
No.
somebody's own Uber or Lyft.
Yeah. They control that.
No, it's
They
their
can
own
say no.
car. It's their own personal vehicle.
I mean, it'd be nice if they cleaned it out so
Yeah.
she can sit there. See, I never thought about what the Sister Louise just said about wanting to see. Because sometimes as a driver, we get on the bus, we talk to the other driver, so we're blocking people's vision. I've had people ask me, can you stand out the way?
While you're driving?
No, while I'm standing there talking to the other driver.
Okay.
'Cause I'm blocking the windshield.
Okay.
They can't see it. I never thought about it. So what Sister Louise said is real. People want to see.
Right. Well, I'm used to driving. Unfortunately, I have been driving a vehicle since I was 13.
Okay.
Because I used to pick up my uncle who was drunk at the corner bar all the time. And his the bartender used to call me and say, come and get him, come and get him. And I would walk to the bar, and the guy would come out and hand me my uncle's keys. And then I would have to get my uncle in the car and drive him home.
Well, that's a confession.
Yeah.
on the air.
I was 13 and now I'm 90. So just think about how long ago that was.
What kind of car did he have?
What?
What kind of car did he have?
I think he had an Oldsmobile.
It must have been big. It had to be.
And then he also had a truck. So I had to drive a truck, and it had a stick shift on the floor.
Well, I'm gonna stop Louise, because if she keeps talking, she's going, that's enough for the district attorney to come and say, we're gonna charge you.